Before we get started, there will be spoilers for the 1000-year Blood War arc of Bleach in the video to come. The nature of how each captain ascended to their position isn't something that's often dwelled on in Bleach at all. For the simple fact is that we know there are 3 ways for an officer of the Gotei 13 to become a captain. Firstly, they can display their skills as a Shinigami by having attained Bankai. Secondly, they can be personally recommended by several existing captains. And third and finally, they can kill another captain in combat. Virtually every single captain of the Gotei 13 as we know it today became a captain via that first method, showcasing their proficiency and suitability for the role by having Bankai. It can be easy to forget when you consider most of the main supporting cast of Bleach has a Bankai or exists within a Bankai's proximity, but having a Bankai is meant to be a very rare thing. Then, as seen in the Turn Back the Pendulum arc, Kisuke Urahara becomes a captain through the second method, having the personal recommendation of Yoruichi and then being overseen by several others. And of course, finally, Kenpachi Zaraki famously becomes the captain of the 11th Division by killing the previous captain, Kenpachi Kiganjo. And obviously, these methods aren't mutually exclusive. Just because Kisuke was promoted via recommendation doesn't mean he didn't have Bankai at the time, for example. And yet, while virtually every captain has a Bankai, some achieved it through less than honourable means, through a slightly more unorthodox method. And with an unorthodox method comes an unorthodox captain. As revealed late into the 1000-year Blood War arc, the captain of the 12th Division, Mayuri Kurotsuchi, achieved Bankai through a less than desirable method. A method that ties directly into the personal history of both himself and his former vice-captain and daughter, Nemu Kurotsuchi. Konjiki Ashisogi Jizo has always been a twisted abomination of a Bankai, taking the form of a grotesque golden Jizo with the bloated body of a caterpillar, and its origins are just as warped as you might expect. So let's take a look at the twisted truth behind the birth of Mayuri's Bankai and how it ties into his character and the character of those around him. And as is normally the case, exploring a topic like this brings with it so many additional questions, some of which we will try and speculate some answers for here today, but many of which I'm sure will unfortunately continue to elude us. So, firstly, to take a top-down holistic look at the topic to begin with, what exactly is Mayuri's Bankai? Upon activation, Mayuri conjures a gigantic golden Jizo that essentially looks like a baby, at least at the front, yet it has the body of a caterpillar trailing behind it. From its grotesque mouth, a purple poisonous smog spews, and it clutches a sword in one of its stubby hands. Above the Jizo's head sits an enormous silver halo decorated with ornate bells, and it wears a red cloak tied around its bulbous neck that gives it a strangely quaint look. Much later come the 1000-year Blood War arc, Mayuri alters and modifies his Bankai to completely transform it. And of course the idea of Mayuri altering and experimenting on his own Zanpakuto is central to this video today. But by the time of his battle with Pernida, gone is the Golden Jizo as the Bankai's primary body. Instead, it's replaced by a purple, bastardized version of a Buddha-like entity, who slouches languidly upon a bed of tentacles. The Buddha has a deep scar running down its abdomen, and it births the Jizo of Mayuri's previous Bankai, now perfectly equipped to counter Mayuri's opponents based on the information he has fed to his Bankai throughout the course of the ongoing battle. Now, Mayuri's Bankai has a lot of thematic Buddhist representation and symbolism to it, like so much else in the world of Bleach. The Jizo is an enlightened being, a monk, who is associated with a number of different things, but in particular, the Jizo is a renowned protector of children. And that's where things get truly, really twisted. On the surface, Mayuri's Bankai seemingly reflects the Jizo, it's even in the name, and yet this is an abomination, a monstrosity, a toxic creature dredged up from the bowels of hell itself. Mayuri has taken this protector of children and turned it into a poisonous, gluttonous, killing machine that takes and devours its enemies, gorging itself on their flesh, all the while projecting this image of the golden Jizo. But when you look closely, when you look behind the front-facing visage, you see there is more to this monstrosity than meets the eye. And all of this feeds back into the origins of the Bankai and the depravity surrounding how Mayuri attained it. And so, how did Mayuri achieve Bankai? Well, it certainly wasn't through the usual route of getting to know your Zanpakuto, of materializing your Zanpakuto spirit and then forcing it to heal. Oh no, in typical Mayuri fashion, it is quite different. Of course, Mayuri has a history of forcibly modifying his Zanpakuto, whether that's installing a self-destruct system in case it ever betrayed him, to altering the composition of his Bankai's poison, to completely changing how his Bankai both looks and works. You kind of get the impression, although it's never outright stated, that whatever growth Mayuri has seen with his Zanpakuto has been unnatural, inhuman, artificial, man-made. In chapter 642, as Nemu prepares to unleash her true power in an effort to save Mayuri from Pernida, we are treated to an explanation of Nemu's birth and the trials and tribulations that led to her eventual creation and evolution. Down in the Serete, Akon commands the remaining units of the 12th Division to begin fixing the laboratory for the captain's return. In the process, one of the scientists, Nico Kuna, accidentally stumbles upon several strange stasis pods, glass canisters that seem to be housing peculiar sinew-like specimens that come bursting out of what appears to be a table of sorts. Akon takes the time to reveal to the other scientists there that these are the earliest remnants of the Nemuri project, attempts 1 through 3 of creating a living, growing, self-sustaining konpaku from nothing. Konpaku meaning a spirit body, essentially. Mayuri's dream, which he supposedly believed was the dream of all Shinigami, is to create life itself from nothing, a self-sustaining form that has originated from Mayuri's own 2 hands. But the 12th Division experienced setback after setback on this seemingly impossible mission. With Akon at his side, Mayuri devoted himself to playing God, attempting to create a konpaku to call his own. However, as we see here, their first 3 attempts were total failures. And now it's hard to say exactly how much work and how many resources went into these first 3 forms, but you have to imagine it was quite a lot. Creating a konpaku out of nothing can't be an easy task. The lint-like remains, as Kuna calls them, housed in these canisters, are all that remains of attempts 1 through 3, which failed to materialize beyond this point. Akon refers to them as corpses, before revealing that with attempt number 4, they were finally able to grow a brain. Now, as we see after Nemu's death in the battle with Pernida, Mayuri is able to extract her brain and make it out of that fight alive with the brain intact. So it seems likely that the creation of a konpaku from the ground up needs a brain as a nexus point to then control the rest of the growth and evolution. Which I guess is why attempt number 4 was perhaps such a big deal. The first one to grow a brain was the first one to show potential at becoming what they were aiming for. At this point, although their Konpaku creation was ultimately still a failure each time, Mayuri and Akon began putting their discoveries to use. Because why waste what you've been able to create so far when you have come so far? And so it's revealed that the technology involved in growing attempt number 4 was used to fix the head of the 12th Division member with the, well, constantly bandaged head. I'm not entirely sure, but I don't think this character has ever been given a name, despite them being around since the very earliest days of the Research and Development Institute as featured in the story. We see him in the same chapter we first see Akon, for example, but I could be wrong. Akon then reveals that with attempt number 5, they were able to create a fetus. Though it didn't grow at all from there, dying once again, another roadblock on the path to success. However, Akon notes that by using the technology that helped give birth to attempt number 5, they began to modify Zanpakuto, and it was through this method that Mayuri eventually became a captain. So, what does this mean exactly, and what are the grander implications? The details are admittedly thin, but we can put together some kind of an idea, in the same vein as Kuna herself when she visualizes Mayuri's Bankai as Akon reveals this tidbit of information. Now, Akon's wording here is interesting. He says that's how Mayuri was able to become a captain. He doesn't explicitly mention Bankai, but we can theorize that is what he's getting at, and this appears to be the same line of thought that Nico Kuna is going down, as when Akon mentions using a fetus to modify a Zanpakuto, her first thought is Mayuri's Bankai. It seems likely, then, that Mayuri somehow took this technology that is capable of creating Konpaku fetuses and infused it into the makeup of his own Zanpakuto, giving life to his Bankai perhaps, which is why the Bankai itself takes on the form of a baby-like creature. Either that, or he took one of the created fetuses and infused that directly into his sword, altering his Zanpakuto and his Zanpakuto spirit to create what would become Konjiki Ashisogi Jizo. If the golden baby present during Mayuri's Bankai is indeed a reflection of the fetus that was created via their Konpaku experiments, then that is pretty dark. A warped visualization of Mayuri's dream to create life, now subjugated and affixed to his Zanpakuto, little more than a mad experiment. But also, as mentioned earlier, on a thematic level, the Jizo is meant to be a protector of children. However, this one was seemingly born from the abuse of that process, of that idea. What we can surmise is that Mayuri essentially manufactured this fetus and then stapled it onto his Zanpakuto, and it now takes the appearance of a twisted version of a Jizo as if to represent that fact. The idea that Mayuri is playing God. Mayuri took something that wasn't meant to be and somehow made it a part of his Zanpakuto, gaining incredible power as a result. But how exactly does this work? Akon states that they used the technology that resulted in attempt number 5 to modify Zanpakuto. So does that mean Mayuri forced his Zanpakuto to birth the Bankai? Much in the same way we would later see reflected in his altered Bankai from the 1,000-Year Blood War. However, if that technology can't progress any further than the fetus stage, then why choose that to modify Zanpakuto with? And how does that transition to gaining a Bankai? We really don't have much to go on, but let's look at the flip side of things instead, Mayuri's Shikai Ashisogi Jizo. Now what's weird about this is that the golden baby design permeating Mayuri's Bankai clearly doesn't begin with the Bankai. In Shikai, Mayuri's Zanpakuto features a prominent golden baby face as well, which would imply this fetus technology didn't result in that Bankai's look directly. Unless Mayuri Shikai didn't originally look like this, and only took on this appearance once he applied the technology to his blade in order to modify it. Perhaps it was something totally different in the past, prior to its modification. It's definitely very strange, which is par for the course where Mayuri is concerned, obviously. But with what little information we have, I'm inclined to believe the correct answer is likely the simplest one, that Mayuri took one of the fetus they created and somehow merged or fused it with his Zanpakuto. Again, I don't know why they would have thought that would have been some kind of a benefit. I don't know what benefit that would have been, but Mayuri's Bankai taking the form of a caterpillar does seem to imply a theme of chrysalis or evolution, and so it would make sense for the origins of Mayuri's Bankai to spawn from some failed attempt at creating life. In that sense, this version of Mayuri's Bankai is some halfway creation, which again works for me. If he didn't acquire Bankai in the normal fashion, instead simply experimenting on his blade in a malicious way to finally get there, then it would make sense for this to be some strange half-step instead. This is all, of course, by the way, total speculation, but it would be interesting if we never really saw Mayuri's true Bankai at all. Instead, these are just more of his monstrous creations that he's applied directly to his ever-suffering blade. It's also possible that Mayuri took the fetus technology and implanted it into his Zanpakuto, giving his Zanpakuto the capability to grow, which is what allowed it to achieve Bankai. The fact it takes the appearance of a Jizo in both Shikai and Bankai could just be a grim coincidence. Another question remains as well. Akon casually tells the division that with this technology they modified Zanpakuto, but does that mean there are more Zanpakuto out there than just Mayuri's that have been infused with fetus from the Mayuri project? What if Akon's Zanpakuto turns out to be similar? We really just don't know, and ultimately the research and development department have shown themselves to be capable of anything, ethical or otherwise. But whatever the case, the truth behind the origins of Mayuri's Bankai is horrifying. The fact it was born from this technology fascinates me, and I'm still not even really sure what it means. Why did Mayuri think this technology was what he needed to achieve Bankai? Is it just the potential for growth? But if that's the case, why use technology that couldn't grow beyond the fetus stage in the first place? Also, this means that Nemu and Mayuri's Bankai are technically related in a weird way. I also wonder if Kisuke is aware of how Mayuri attained his captaincy rank, and if he's impressed by that, disgusted by it. It's kind of hard to say since we don't know the ins and outs of what Mayuri actually did, outside of Akon's vague explanation that they modified Zanpakuto using this particular technology. Anyway, that about does it for today's shorter video, but it's a weird and wonderful topic that I wanted to address, and it kind of acts as a follow-up to the video we did looking at Nemu just a few weeks ago. Tell me what you think. How did Mayuri use this technology to achieve Bankai? Why did he do so? And is the fetus they were able to create reflected in his Zanpakuto's design, or is it just a coincidence? There's a ton of questions. Maybe the anime will flesh it out some more. We'll have to wait and see. Alright everyone, but that's it for today's video. As always, I really hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts and your feelings down in the comments below. Give me some answers to those questions that I just posed, because I really am curious and very unsure about this topic, but I'd love to hear your thoughts nonetheless. And as always, I want to end the video by saying a massive thank you and giving a huge shout out to my wonderful supporters over on Patreon, without whom I wouldn't be able to do this. If you love what I do here on YouTube and you want to support me that extra step further, thank you. By visiting the link down in my description, you can visit my Patreon page, and by supporting me at the dollar level, you can get your name in the credits of every single video just like this. And by supporting me at the $2 or up level, you can get every video I release absolutely free of baked-in YouTube ads. Alright guys, but until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.